not even gonna knock on wood or anything.
Let's just find out. Live stream. Okay, I will then, as it's 7 o'clock, call to order this second regular monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. Are there any changes to the agenda other than the one addition we have, which is the consideration of a resolution of support for the town of Ulysses acquisition of recreational property? Anything else? All right. Takes us immediately to item number 3, which is our first public comment period. We have another one at the end.
No, I just came to hear you speak of the resolution for the town.
Okay, great. Then item number 4 is old business. We have first up. It's probably an update. I'm hoping an update on the DEC's zero emission vehicle procurement process, etc.
So it is unfortunately not an update. We do have, so we were awarded a make ready grant, which is essentially GPS sort of through NYSEG awards. When you put in an electric vehicle fast charger or any kind of charger, NYSEG is kind of obligated to pay some of the back end. So if there's a charger, you can imagine the front piece connects to the car, and then behind that you have to connect to the electrical infrastructure. So you have to get to the pole and the NYSEG piece. So NYSEG covers, I forget if it's 80 or 90% of the cost. I think it depends on some of the metrics involved of that sort of back end piece. We have been awarded that grant. They have asked me to accept the grant, which I cannot do. It's $30,000. So the first question is, can we ask Roden or give Roden permission to sign accepting that money? The second is, I have been working with a company called JCOM, who has done basically all of the engineering, all of the grant administration, the application. They've been so far doing all of this for free. They are still doing it for free. We haven't been officially re-awarded the DEC ZEP grant yet. But I'm curious about the procurement, how that works with them. At this point, they have inside knowledge that we couldn't possibly hope to replicate, but it's a little bit of a backdoor way around our procurement policy. So I was hoping to just have kind of a chat about how we want to work that. What's the best way to sort of keep that, transparent and fair. While at the same time sort of acknowledging that without them at this point, we don't have a leg to stand on really in terms of the process. I think for me, it's a fairly specialized set of skills and specialized knowledge that we couldn't hope to replicate. So it works as far as our procurement policy goes, but I don't want to move ahead with that as an assumption any further. I think if we're going to keep going with this, at this point, they have been working on it for more than a year.
The DEC part.
The DEC part, yeah. Although the make ready part as well.
And how did you end up? How did you and them begin working on the DEC part?
So the library board, I believe JCOM had done some outreach, sort of blanket promotional type outreach. The library board said, this is a great idea, let's start doing this. They reached out to the town and to me, and we had a working group for a while that was basically exploring these options. We did sort of a walkthrough of different town options and village options, where we could site things, maybe at the library, all of that. The more we thought about it, the more we realized that all of the locations we really wanted that were the best suited for the community were on village-owned property. So at that point, I took the lead and basically started working with JCOM just as a village representative rather than as sort of a working group. And now we find ourselves in this situation where they've basically been doing this pro bono for a long time.
So they were originally working with the library.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know if they had planned to do the grant administration, and we're going to take fees from that?
So their business model, yes, is to, they've built in their costs to, exactly as you said, once the grant is awarded, then the administration is where they make some money back, presumably a profit of something, but it's all built into the grant application. So for us, there's no cost associated with that, just because of the way it's structured.
So we've applied for the grant for the charger, right?
Yeah.
But we just don't know whether we're gonna get it or not. And there will be no charger if we don't get the
We
grant.
were
Yeah.
awarded.
Yeah.
And it was unawarded because of DEC budgeting or.
Oh, I see.
Some strange bureaucratic nightmare presumably is happening behind the scenes, but yeah, as Gordon said, we were awarded the grant several months ago, at the beginning of the summer. And then we got kind of it wasn't even an official notice of any kind, it was just, we kind of got word through back channels at DEC that it had been unawarded and they were gonna reevaluate the whole round. So not just us, but everyone who applied for that grant.
And how much is the grant for the charger?
I don't remember the full total, but it's. Yeah,
650?
100.
Oh,
150,000.
150,000.
That's per charger, so the total is 300. And then plus the make ready. So it's sizable. It's sizable.
And our part would be how much? Cause how much is a
Or the-
charger?
At the end, of
Yeah,
the total
yeah.
cost. So it's fairly minimal. Like I said, the make ready covers, I believe it's 80 or 90% of 30,000. Zev grant covers the full thing, but that's not even really what I'm asking about here, is whether we accept that
Right,
grant. This is more just in terms of procurement. Can we in good faith, or can I in good faith continue to rely on a company that's not being paid, with sort of the dual assumption that one, they don't really want to be paid or something, I don't know. And that we would eventually go through a procurement process with them.
So we don't need to do procurement. What we need is a proposal from them. Just think what MRB does. We need a proposal from them that states that they will provide these grant writing services. And then grant administration at some X dollars for the purposes of the ZEV grant, which has already been applied for, but now is still in some, they don't need to necessarily say that it's in some kind of limbo, but we need their proposal to do the job they've already done and will continue to do.
Yeah. For
us to approve.
Yeah, that suits me fine.
And then they're still not getting paid unless we get the grant.
Right.
But that's written into the proposal.
Yeah, that suits me. If we don't want to do a whole RFP, I would feel much better about it. But again, I just wanted to check in and see that we're all kind of on the same page there.
Yeah, I think that's the cleanest way to do it. I mean, that's what we do. We just did it for sidewalk in MRB. We're not sending that out to RFP. So you don't have to.
Okay. That suits me.
Considering they've done the work already, the grant application is done, and we're just waiting to find out if they're gonna re-award. But it's to protect them as well, because if we are awarded the grant, we're not obligated to use them for grant administration.
Right. Oh, I know, 100%.
So having that in place will be.
Yeah, they'll be happy to do that, I'm sure. I mean, I think early on, before this started to drag on, it felt like a reasonable sort of outlay of time and effort. And now that it's going sort of, I don't know, we're in that bureaucratic stage. But that's fine. That's great. I'll bring that to the next meeting. And then the other piece is I would move that we approve or direct Gordon to sign the make ready grant acceptance. Second.
Motion and a second. What's the deadline for using that?
For using make ready? Functionally, it's the year. I mean, it would go with the ZEP grant, so it's. Yeah, and actually, ironically, this kind of dovetails better now with the what is it, member designated funds that we had talked about as far as timing.
Yeah.
The delay was going to be the hard part. And it no longer is never. Okay.
I remember talking about this. On whether or not it was going to be the fast chargers or the not as fast chargers, which
We moved up. So it'll now be, it's two stations, one in this parking lot, one at the farmer's market, but they'll both be 120 kW, which is there, so it's shared, it's a two port, it's one station, two ports, so you can charge two cars. If it's two cars charging simultaneously, the max is 60, but if it's just a single car, then the max is 120. Which is a solution that I feel really quite good about. Generally with fast chargers, the uptake, it would frequently just be one car. So I think that's a pretty ideal solution, and it doesn't change our financial, burden. So.
And do people get charged for the electric they use?
So that is a decision we'll have to make later. Depending on who does this and what model we're going for, you can have it built in different ways. You can charge at cost, you can charge with a markup, you can charge nothing. Like the town did, I think, 5 years with no charge, and then started charging after that time elapsed. It may not be 5 years, don't quote me on that. Maybe it was just a couple or 3 or something along those lines. But you can come up with any model you want. It's all software driven, so it's fairly adaptive.
Yeah, I asked because randomly had a conversation with someone during my day job who was talking about this, and they use a lot of charging between Boston and Cornell, and they were saying that if it's not the fast chargers, it's kind of not worth it, because otherwise you're stuck in that town that you're stopping at to charge for a really long time. Like
It's
6 or 7
definitely-
hours.
It's an interesting thing. I did a road trip to West Virginia in an EV, and it was challenging to say the least. I mean, we had to go out of our way pretty substantially to find chargers. So I think in that was definitely sort of eye-opening as far as the people that we would bring into the village. I think it would be real numbers. And then the other use cases, people who own an EV locally. I think for most of them, we would, they would have access presumably to level 2 chargers at their house. That's really the trick, is if you have, people that have an EV but maybe live on Main Street in one of the upper stories and don't have parking of their own where they can charge it. That's the other pretty obvious use case, as well as hopefully someday village vehicles. But yeah, definitely fast chargers are essential for anyone traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ben on the make ready piece? We have a motion and a second to authorize me to sign necessary paperwork to accept the make ready contract. If there are no other questions, then all in favor of authorizing that, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next item of whole business. This must be what Marcia dropped off for us.
In my Dropbox on the table.
Contractual funds for outside
Physical.
organizations.
Yes, the mayor taxed me with this a while back, but we had bigger fish to fry, so I just really put it on the back burner because it wasn't overly important. But we had been talking in the past about coming up with a new way to have organizations apply for contractual funding to get some money for their organization that could benefit their program. I would like to see, and this is all up for discussion, but as you can see by the sheet I dropped off, it's not exhaustive. There isn't a bunch of questions. I don't think there's any need for any board member or anyone to come in front of the board to justify the funds. Number one, the funds is probably not going to be a ton of money, so I don't think you need to justify it to death. So all it has is the name of the organization. I think the board needs to decide, does it have to be a not-for-profit organization, or is it in the parameter of, is there a typical organization that perhaps maybe isn't a not-for-profit, but just is a teeny tiny small organization that could use a little bit of a boost? So I guess we would need to decide, are we just going to do not-for-profits, or is there going to be some wiggle room with that? I would like to see, and this is just my opinion, and I don't know how the board feels about it. I would like people that apply for this to apply for money that will be used within that year. I love instant gratification. I would like it to be for a specific program. So in other words, if the organization comes and said, this is going to be earmarked for a certain program, this is how much money we think that we would need, and that they would have to use it in that year. In other words, they can't bank it, they can't invest it. I mean, not that it's a ton of money to invest, but I mean, they can't bank it. They have to use it, and they have to earmark it for a specific program that would benefit the community. And another thing that I have on this work, on this application is the amount of funding requested. What is the expected impact of the program within the community? What is the organization's fundraising goals for the year? And how will the organization raise those funds? I think there needs to be onus on the side of the organization that's asking for money. We need to know, what do you do to benefit your organization? And what are the things that your organization does to raise money for itself? So, and then the last question is, how will this funding significantly impact your organization? And the expected impact of the program question obviously is, how would it impact the community? So I think we had a discussion before on how much money we think we should earmark for this type of funding. And if this works for everyone, I think we need to decide on the parameters of people applying for this money. And I also don't think it should be an income stream for any particular organization. It shouldn't be money that's counted on every year, because I would like to see more organizations be able to apply for this. And maybe one year, one organization may need it more than another. So I think that, it's up to the board, and I don't think it needs to be this big thing. And I think this application is thorough enough to give the board an idea of what somebody's asking for. So any comments are open for discussion.
Initial thoughts, questions, comments? It wouldn't need to be a not-for-profit.
Okay.
I don't see a way to include certainly any private sector.
Right. Okay.
Municipalities count.
I didn't know what the parameters were before,
Municipalities.
but I did have not-for-profit on here. I just didn't know if it was.
Would they have to be a 501c3?
Well, it'd have to be a 501c something.
I mean, we have given money to do taking care of T-Bird. They're not.
We've never given them
No,
money
no.
directly.
Oh, we
We've
buy
spent-
supplies.
We've spent money.
We've spent money for it. That's right.
And-
Okay.
And that's through DPW, right?
And
Yeah.
volunteers do the work.
Right, okay. That's different. You're right. Okay.
Yeah, there are 9, I think there's 9 501c designations, although I don't think the NFL is gonna come to us for any money, but.
I think I've given them enough for everybody here.
Any other thoughts, comments? What do we think?
I think this is fine. I think programmatically, as far as how we do it, Marcia, you and I are likely to disagree on a very, very fundamental level, so I'm excited for those conversations, but I think this is fine and a good starting place. Yeah, it's great. Thanks for putting it together.
Okay.
My only comment, I don't know why, but the word significantly on the back is jumping out at me.
Okay.
If we just said, how will this funding impact your organization?
Okay.
I don't want to feel like we're shoehorning ourselves into like making a significant, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a few hundred, a few $1,000s. It
Right.
may not be significant, but I would like us to have the flexibility.
And I
to-
really feel like this funding should be just an acknowledgement and thankfulness for what they contribute to the community. I don't think it should be, like I said, I don't think it should be an income stream. I don't think it's anything that should be expected. I think it's just like when we apply for grants, if we get it, we get it. If we don't, we don't. We do have some sort of justification for why we feel we need it. And then it's up to the board to decide.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think I have the same kind of vision of like, it's more of a token in many ways. And so that I think taking significantly out feels like it
Okay.
makes more sense in that light.
And how do you feel about putting the parameter of them having to earmark it for a specific program so you know exactly what it's going for?
So I think we should separate having that on the form versus having that be a mandatory criteria for consideration are two different things. Right, so if we're evaluating a program and they say it doesn't, then that would just be something we would take into account while we're evaluating.
Okay,
To me, and actually, I'm thinking about it, I would almost just delete the last question.
okay,
So for instance, when we apply for a grant, it actually doesn't significantly or otherwise impact the organization.
right, we're just hoping to get some,
It's the community that's impacted, not the
Right.
organization. So I would
Right.
maybe just strike. them.
So,
okay, yeah, that's kind of repetitive, you're right.
I was gonna give that feedback as well.
Yep.
I think we could shift.
It is repetitive, yes.
yeah, and I don't mind, yeah, asking the question about the specific program. And I could see it being the specific program is like, at the library, it's like opening a library. Like
Yeah.
that might be, it might be generic and that's also fine to
Or
me.
buy books, or
Right.
they have their wonderful craft time for the children, you know, maybe they need craft supplies and they want to
Right.
apply for, that's.
And I
kind
think
of
some
what I'm-
places will be specific enough, and I think other places may not have all those pieces in
Right.
line to be
And
specific.
if it were the food pantry, to buy food, I mean.
Right.
Right.
Right,
know,
it,
very
right, it can be,
specific.
it can be specific, but it can also be kind of generic.
Right,
like
and I think that, I
of
I
the
put
food.
that question in there simply because I feel it would make it a lot easier for the board to determine the funding, if we knew exactly what it was going for, instead of just this
Right, I think if we-
blanket, you
if we
know,
were to have, you know, a dozen or 2 dozen organizations apply and we couldn't manage all of them, it might be an interesting piece of information for our deliberations.
yes, and I think something that's not really clear, and it's something that I didn't really know, before I got in the board, is what is the timeline for this? Like, when are the applications normally? When do people apply for the money, and when is it determined when it's obviously within our budget year, but
Yeah, that'd be good to have either on here or as like a second cover.
yeah,
letter
I
or
thought there would
something.
be a second cover sheet that just basically outlined everything.
Right,
But I thought we would discuss how
Yeah,
that.
I do think generally when you send something like this out.
Right, you have a
you'll
cover
just sort of
sheet.
say,
Mm-hmm,
this is what this is and this is what we're looking for.
There may be some legal requirements already in place. I know in university fundraising, basically a unrestricted gift needs to be used in the year it was given. So you can't take a whole bunch of annual fund dollars, let's say, that are unrestricted gifts to the university and just hoard them
right,
for next year. They have to be used for budget relief in that fiscal year. So I don't know if they have to play by those rules as well. I'm guessing the nonprofits get a little bit of leeway, but yeah, I would say offering that as a line, but not restricting it, because I could see something where maybe the library wants to do a special program, but it only makes sense if they can commit to 3 years of the program, but they kind of need that money up front and they're going to use it over 3 years or something like that. I don't know how likely that is to have happen, but I just wouldn't want to tie everyone's hands too much.
well, I think that would apply if the money was a lot of money, but I mean, we're not gonna be giving a
Maybe.
lot of money.
Well, we talked about, allocating what, 30,000 a year? Is that still the number?
I think it really depends on how far we want to go with this. I mean, that's
Yes.
maybe going a little bit into the weeds, but do we want to include our youth commission allocation? Do we want to include? I feel like the library is kind of the crux, the beginning, the catalyst for this conversation.
I wanna leave the library out of it,
But we also.
out of the conversation, I mean,
Well, we generally,
calm down,
I mentioned them because we generally seem like we get the same 3 organizations.
Right.
But we also fund, so we fund the youth commission.
Right.
And it's like 36,000, somewhere in there. We fund taking care of T-Bird, but sort of indirectly, the farmer's market, all of these are things that we sort of think of as core, but really are
we
fall
can,
into the same category to me, or could. I mean, depending on how we want to parse it,
but
but I
I think
think,
like originally though, we were looking at this as a separate pool of money for
Right.
these types of requests, not.
right, but
I was
what I'm
thinking-
saying is, what's the distinction? Right, like,
well, the distinction is we already fund that, right?
but we already fund all of the other.
The
ones
distinction
too.
also, if I might interject, is a little bit of the OSC budget line, so you can have within your budget the your cultural events, which is what the farmer's market really sort of comes under. So this is maybe some of that too. It does.
It's not the distinction. The distinction is the farmer's market is a wholly owned village entity. The youth commission, we are a municipal partner. Three Falls LDC is a not-for-profit, but we are a municipal member. So this might be as simple as saying, you know, application for contractual funds for unaffiliated nonprofit organizations.
Well, we're a member of the chamber.
Yeah.
We are a member, but not on the control side, right? So we're the LDC, the village through its representatives is part of the board of the LDC. Farmers market doesn't exist if the village doesn't own it.
I mean, I think there's a distinction there. I think what I hear you talking about, Ben, is at some point in the conversation, and it wandered quite a bit, we talked about kind of looking more holistically at all of the kind of cultural places where we, as a board, spend money beyond just EMS, water, sewer, roads, front office, like the core basics, right? And if we wanted to think more holistically, and I don't actually know where I stand on this, honestly, but like if we want to think more holistically of maybe we bundle all that up and there's $80,000 that we're spending in a variety of different places, and we're thinking of it kind of as a big, larger bunch that we're having conversation about, or if we're zooming in just to like this kind of set of nonprofits that I think we all kind of have a sense of what's in this little pocket, but to your point, like they're all kind of under this umbrella of like community improvement that's outside of like just day-to-day infrastructure and emergency response.
I mean, this would theoretically open it. I mean, when we look at the unaffiliated not-for-profits, we're talking about TCR, library, and the historical society, basically. Food net. So there's no reason why.
But I can think of other organizations that are not for profit in Trumansburg that have never applied that I would
Right,
like
so
to see
this
apply.
would mean that, you know, Little Blue Raiders football is now officially a 501c. You know, so there's any
Most of
number
the sports organizations are.
in the non-school affiliated ones. Some of them are.
Right, which are clubs, right? Technically,
So the ones that have gone, the ones that have made the effort or taken the extra step of becoming an actual not-for-profit organization, that means they can apply.
mhm.
I mean, that's
That's why I think it's very important to have that question on as to why they're seeking funds. I think it would make it a lot easier. Say if we had a dozen or more people applying for us to weed down the necessity. I don't think everybody needs to get that. I mean, I don't know how much money you're talking. I think $30,000 they'd buy an awful lot of stuff at the fire department. It'd buy an awful lot of stuff at the DPW. He'd buy radios at the fire company. I mean, I don't think it needs to be.
I think what's going to happen, Marsh, is I like this. I like having the paper trail of who's applying and for what and for why. But I also think what's going to happen is a decade from now, it's going to be 75,000 and there's going to be a lot of organizations applying. Just because there's a lot of, the reason why all of these not-for-profits have popped up over the last 20 years is because there's a need.
Right.
There's a need and these organizations are trying to fill a need. And they haven't had a way to get funding. And, you know, they come hat in hand to the town or the school or the village, but it's been very informal. This makes it more formal, which is good from a record keeping standpoint. It also makes it easier for the organizations to apply.
Right.
So once word gets out that the village has got money, why wouldn't they apply? And I don't know that that's a bad thing. I think that kind of goes into the, what are we going to bundle from a community good standpoint. And, you know, whether it's 20,000 or 120,000, any board will have to decide how to chop it up.
Right.
Or any board can say, yeah, everybody's applied, we're going to fund it all this year. We can't prevent that from happening in the future if that's what a future board wants to do. And I don't really have, in this moment, I don't really have an opinion as to, you know, whether it's better to try to restrict's not the right word. Whether it's better to try to control the number of the amount of money that's spent on non-village departments or non-village entities. Or whether we open the door and this is the way we open the door, and then every board gets to decide based on kind of the whims of that particular board, which direction they want to go in.
All right. Well, we set a budget for everything else. So.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Well, my only point is that some village board, maybe not this one, is gonna say, we love all of the community work.
Mhm.
And our budget's gonna be $150,000 for it.
And then the very next village board is gonna do a flag policy style rewrite.
Exactly.
This is what we can and can't fund.
Well, we're never obligated to say yes to
Right,
anything either.
right, exactly.
I don't know, there's some fairness, I think that like, there's a reason that generally there's points awarded, it like. Some attempt at fairness is pretty essential, so I think. Enough iterations and we'll start to feel obligated. Even though we won't, maybe technically.
We may, but a future board may not. And that's the interesting, that's kind of the interesting,
Does the state feel like they have to be fair when we do grant requests?
Absolutely,
No.
they do. No, they absolutely.
They do?
Yeah, so when you're behind the scenes at the state, there's. Well, I can only speak for nice.
That's not-
But
I don't feel seen by the New York State government all
oh,
the time.
there's so many layers that go into that feeling of not seeing. No, but they get audited on fairness. Like, how did you evaluate this grant? All of these grants, why did you pick one and not the other?
Like offering a grant and then taking it off the table.
Yeah, that one baffles me. But they took it off the table for everyone, so it's very.
So that, I guess that's fair.
Very
Yeah.
fair.
Another thing I think about adding to this is asking if they received money from us in the previous year and some
Oh,
kind
that's a
of
good one.
some sort of evaluation of how.
How did you use it?
Of how you used it, like, do you feel, tell us the story of how you used your funding last year. That's their chance.
I'm also trying
our
to
heartstrings.
find where I saw it, and I don't remember how this kind of structure happens budgetarily, but there is a contract at the end of the day that we as a village, as a board, are contracting with these entities for services. And
I've never seen a contract. It was always, from my visibility at least, it was just we budgeted it and that kind of was the contract. And then Vicky wrote a check. Am I wrong?
no,
No.
there's a letter.
There is a letter.
Oh, there's like an
That
offer.
has to be signed by both sides.
Okay.
And so I don't know. I'm curious then at that point, if that impacts anything that we're looking for, if there's anything around
Like deliverables.
deliverables, or maybe it is just to say that it's a specific program. And that's the thing that we're helping, but like,
That we're helping fund, so that I want to know where my money's going. I don't want it to just be. Poof out there.
In theory, so the end game of that rabbit hole is that in theory, we are. Signing a contract for a third party to deliver services that the village doesn't deliver.
right,
So for instance, the DPW contract specifically says we can't outsource certain things.
right,
That should be DPW. So when we look at Three Falls, when we look at TCR, when we look at Meals on Wheels, Library Historical Society, they are fulfilling functions the village doesn't do. So if taking care of T-Berg became an actual not-for-profit and wanted to duplicate the work that DPW is doing, we could probably get in some interesting,
yeah.
if not hot, at least.
And some
Better.
sports might overlap with youth.
Well, and we need to be careful because another thing that makes it sticky is we're a very small community. So a lot of members of boards have children on sports teams, and a lot of members of boards give their time and energy to other committees, and we have to make sure that it doesn't get,
T-Bird.
right. Well, it makes it hard. It makes it very difficult, especially when you live in a small community. And and everybody knows everybody, and if you're working as a community, you're working together with other you know, with people. And so that's kind of
There are
like,
some things that government can do that other organizations can, and there's some things that the organizations can't that we can. I mean, we can't directly fundraise, you know, that's a huge limitation on us. So there's definitely, I think that's kind of where these lines always end up showing up in municipal budgets, because there is overlap. But
I think it just makes me wonder about framing this, and maybe it's kind of mostly the same questions, but a slightly bit different bend of like, what are the services you're providing to the community that we would be working with you, you know, kind of essentially purchasing from you? And
Right.
I don't know how specific I want to get with that language or not. I kind of want to pull up the
could we
details.
change the wording on what is the expected impact of the program and just add community in there?
What is the
Could-
expected impact
on the
On the
community?
I think that would help. Yeah,
And just reword that particular
I would reword it to what is the expected benefit?
benefit
yeah,
to the
The
community.
village. I mean, this is, they're
Yeah.
asking for village taxpayer dollars, so.
right,
Yeah.
to the village.
The village, okay. Yes,
Yeah, I think that definitely helps.
So I do just sort of want to jump back in if I might, on the notion of that, we do already, the things that we already allocate for have specific OST budget lines, like there is parks and recs, there are museums and historical places, so presumably we would need to plot, and there's a lot of categories in the A700, but looking at them might also help frame the dialogue of what you can contribute to easily without getting made into like, is that a service or not a service?
good idea.
I might also suggest that you consider asking for demonstration of the use of funds by the end of the completed year.
Yes,
And at the danger, the hell it might put on my office, the applications might want to by the end of January, if you want to consider them for the next fiscal year. And do you actually want to see more financial picture? If they're a longstanding organization, do you want to see more of their?
no. This is,
I don't
I,
want to show a demonstration of their ability to be successful with the funds. Like some common language from some grants. Maybe I'll just find the wording I need and throw it at you later. Just maybe you don't.
I just don't want it to get too, exhaustive. I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, I really think it has been before. I think the towns is really exhaustive. And I don't want our, you know, the people that commit their time and run these organizations have to, you know, stand on their head and do all that. And I think it could be settled.
Fair point. I think I'm
Then
thinking,
here.
of what if they're brand new and they don't have it in the street, like. Can we be certain of that? And
I see what you're saying.
Maybe the money
Yeah.
might not be as productive. Thank
Well,
you.
I will say this, this piece of paper is about 1/10 of what some local businesses require you to fill out if you're looking for a donation to a community or organization. So this is light work for and you should be for anybody seeking.
If we get too many, we can add some more pages.
That's probably. what the strategy
And if
is.
there's questions that seem to be open-ended, certainly there is you know, we should. I know I put the organization, but we should probably put down for contact person
Yeah.
and phone number, so that if we did have some questions to ask,
Mhm.
we could contact that person directly, and it doesn't need to be this big.
I like that, yeah.
So you want
Hey.
to revise this for our December meeting?
Yes,
Okay?
yep, sounds good.
Is it worth also adding a note that kind of says not required, but you are encouraged to speak to this application
Oh,
at a board meeting? I mean, like I said, it's not
Yeah.
Honestly, just provide any additional, you know, just a catch-all.
Yeah,
I know I'd like to if it was my organization, but some
Yes.
would probably rather not.
I mean, I 100% agree. That would be my excuse for another 20 pages of stock grant application.
and I'm assuming somewhere down the line, we're gonna come up with a number.
February and March is budget season.
Not for nothing, there's a lot of recreation budget lines, for public recreation. So,
Not enough. And they're supposed to be coaching right now. All right, so we'll look forward to a revised draft in our December meeting. Unless there's anything else, anyone?
And second December meeting, I'm assuming?
first.
Oh, first?
Because
Okay.
if we do this, then we want to get it out to these organizations.
Right, because,
At the end of the year, first week of January, so they can get it back to us by
okay,
first week of February-ish.
Probably a great thing for the newsletter.
yeah.
We don't ever talk about this really.
Okay, let's put the form in place and then.
I just feel like it's like these four organizations have figured out that they can come to us and nobody else really, not as many people
Right.
know about it.
Okay. Next item of old business, siren notifications. So I wanted to have a conversation based on some emails back and forth. Two parts to this. One is and maybe these two parts of this conversation actually are one. So when the siren notification system replaced Swift, Tompkins County promised that it was a much better system. I'm not sure that that's the case. And a case in point was last week where there were some, the way we set it up was that you were supposedly going to be able to easily target neighborhoods. So the water main, if there's a water main break outside, if there's a water main break on Wig Street, there's really no reason for anyone on Prospect to know about it. They'll find out through the grapevine, but it doesn't affect them. What we found in practice, at least last week, is it's not quite working that way. So these targeted notifications aren't getting to some of the targeted audience. But a village-wide notification gets to everybody. So for the time being, last week I told Jen, go ahead and send it to everybody. The question is for the board, as long as we're using Siren, do we want to work with Tompkins, I guess it's DOER set it up. Do we want to work with them to figure out how to make the targeted system work? If it in fact does, which I don't know that it does. Or do we want to just send emergency notifications, even if they're localized? Do we want to just send them village-wide? That's question number one. Question number two is, there are a number of systems available which are owned by the municipality. We're all familiar with the system the school uses. You get a text or an email or a phone call or all of the above. And it seems to be fairly efficient. You can record the message. We get to hear Tina tell us what's happening. So systems like that. Do we want to look into our own? I've looked at one or two already. The one I'm sort of kind of interested in runs $300 a month. So it's not exorbitant, but it comes with an app that's built for your community. Download it through the iTunes store, the Google Play Store. And it's kind of customized to your community. And then at the village's end, you can send out all kinds of push notifications based on location, type of emergency, et cetera, et cetera. Whether it's that system or something similar to it. I like the RoboDial system for those who still want it. So there's some more investigation to be done. So question number one is, in the meantime, do we use Siren and just send out blasts to the whole community? And if it's not relevant to everyone, question number two is, do we start to look into, as we're going through an IT overhaul and all of that's involved with that, digitizing our files upstairs and moving all of our laws online, and as part of that, do we own our own notification system for our residents?
I do like the overall notification simply because even if it doesn't affect my neighborhood, it might affect where I'm going. You know, like if DPW is out working on a broken water main and I planned on going that way, it's kind of nice to know that I can reroute myself and maybe need to go around or take another way.
How many notifications do you guys send out?
So I've sent out 3 in the past year that I've been here. John's done 1 and, well, 2. This is the most recent for South Street. I don't think before 1. Yeah. Which was targeted. So they've all been targeted except for this most recent one, which is the one we've had feedback.
Like 6 total over the course of the year.
But Dusty might have sent some, but I don't think so. We didn't have many breaks this year. Many water breaks.
But it's not a big number, is what I'm saying.
It's not.
I'm fine with just a village-wide blast.
Yeah.
I don't see no problem. It's not like you're overloading anyone, to me. I do also like the idea of owning a system that's actually tailored. But to me, I mean, the problem with Siren is that you have to opt in. The problem with our system would be that you have to opt in. The problem with our newsletter is you have to opt in. Like, you know, until we're dragging a banner behind an airplane, like, I don't know what we do.
I signed
Well-
a bunch of people last week, or-
I bet you did. I bet you did. I mean, that's kind of the,
so there are more people signing up.
Part of it is you have to opt in, but if you opt in, is it gonna work?
right. But it sounds like village-wide does work.
I feel like if we, so the second part of the question, yeah, I think village-wide works. If we're gonna use, for as long as we're using Siren. The question is, do we, you know, we get what we pay for. So we're not paying for Siren. Do we pay for something that gives us more flexibility?
Is there more, like, I'd be curious to hear more about what those other services get us, if it's just like broadcast messages. Well, but I, like you said, there's an app, what can go in the app, is there ways to make that more interesting and engaging? Like the flip side is, I think I'm one of like 3 people that has the Trumansburg School app, but you do have the app, and there's actually a news feed in there, and there's like, it's a whole bunch, it's a great little resource. No one knows about it.
I didn't know it existed.
Right. No one knows about it, so like that's its own problem. But like, I think if there's more value that we might see out of an app like that, I'd be interested. If it's kind of just another thing that pushes notifications, I think I'd be more inclined to at least engage with the county and see if we can sort out the Swift thing, give it a try. So I guess I want to hear like what more it brings.
What's the staff lift for us owning our own?
Preliminarily, it looks like the staff lift is learning how to push messages. Everything is cloud-based and third party.
But after training, it's just as same as what Siren is.
Yeah. My understanding is that the folks at the school who have access, who have admin access, you know, pull up the app, record the message on your phone. And then it's voice to text for what we get in our text. That's why it's verbatim what we hear when the phone rings. So I think it's meant to be fairly efficient on the user end.
So theoretically, we could do state of the village as a robocall.
Well, that brings up a good point,
Everyone records their own part.
which if there were, so right now we're only using Siren as an emergency base. And
Right.
so I don't remember if there's a level of just a community alerts versus emergencies that people can sign up for.
There's public service.
So like, cause I don't care if there's rapid something from that road, really, right? I don't want to get all the, but we're not sending those kinds of, or like, the streets will be closed for Winterfest. Like you could conceivably send out more other reminders that we are currently not. I'm not saying that we want to start, but I think Siren does have that capacity. So now you're looking also at emergency versus village, right, that they could opt in.
And I
That
think
was
that-
gonna be my question, sorry. Is there certain things can we only use it for emergencies, or do we have that flexibility with
We
Siren?
have community alerts.
That's what I was thinking. So either Siren or another service, it'd be interesting to have, right, different levels of like. This you get in an email that like, and you know, I don't know, that there'll be road closures for Winterfest, and that's like not an emergency, but other things people get a text message for, a phone call. Like, if we can, it opens up a lot of possibilities if we want to kind of go down that route and make use of them. I'd be interested in other options that give us a better communications stance. Just, I think that's general. That might apply to everything, honestly, though.
Yeah, I think that'd be nice. Simply because how many times do you see just before Winterfest? What time did they say the roads closed again? You know?
Well, there's
it'd be
also,
nice to-
yeah, and there's a value in like, if there's something every couple of weeks, even if it's just informational now, people are kind of get used to like always having it. It feels there's more value. People will sign up, people notice if it's broken before it's a water main that they don't get a notification for, like. There could be some more value there. And that, I think this very much goes for anything that we use. We could just think about. Without adding a lot of, I want to balance it with your time and attention, obviously, but
Yeah,
like,
because on one hand, you might be like, for those sort of community alerts, that maybe you can sign up for a newsletter,
right,
you know,
potentially.
which is every week. And
Right.
it repeats things that are important, and there's the news feed, and there's the Facebook page, and there's.
Well, so.
And it's
the-
fair. It's
The,
absolutely fair.
the kind of overriding reason, if there is one, to investigate an alerts notification system that we own, is that we would own it. We don't own Facebook. There was talk years ago, of Facebook doing away with multiple business pages under one user kind of stuff. So if Facebook changes their rules and regs, they've often talked about not allowing the kind of business style Facebook pages to be viewable by non-Facebook users. They haven't done that yet, but that's always coming up. So the website we own, Swift we don't own, Facebook we don't own, newsletter we own. So trying to keep as much of our notification outlets under our control or as much as we can. Long term seems like the better way to go.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, like, again, that app is interesting, because I think what the school does is whatever they put on their news page also ends up in the app. And I have to imagine there's probably an easy way to automate that. When you put it on the website, it should just end up in the app. So if there's like things like that, where we start building another thing that we own that's a communication tool that doesn't add a lot of overhead, but can kind of fit in with our already existing flow, it starts to be interesting.
The one thing that with the siren system though is that you can also sign up for alerts from other parts of the community. So you working as like the insurance or you want to get alerts in other places, so you one place to sign up as opposed to as well.
Assuming it's working correctly.
I think I would just add that we wouldn't own the app either. I mean, we would have a subscription to an existing service and they could change their policies as well. That'd be a little, I mean, not that that's as big a deal. I see sort of what you're after and I agree, but that also causes me some pause as far as, you know, it's not fail safe. I think my inclination is that we do have a newsletter. We have a lot of outlets, certainly a lot more. And I'm reluctant to add more complexity that again, people have to opt into. And I think we're in this weird place where no one knows what we say whenever we say anything until they've missed it and then they're angry. And I don't know that like having another layer of communications really fixes to me that like pushes me away more than encourages me to come in.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, our old friend John Delaney used to say, if you wanted to know what's happening at the school, come to a board meeting. You know, Thomas Jefferson said that, you know, the onus is on the citizen to be well informed, right? So we could take that route. We could certainly
the era of citizen criers.
we could certainly go back to, it feels like a lot longer ago, but we could go back to 2018. And we could remove the Facebook page.
Oh, that's not at all what I'm saying.
No, I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying that philosophically, and you're 100% right. People tend to think we're not doing enough to get the word out on various things. And it was only 5 years ago when you wouldn't have known anything if you didn't do it. So as long as we're going to stay on the path of more communication rather than less, knowing that it'll never be enough.
Well, it is something we're very proud of. But I would say that one thing I like is the ability to do the calls, the automated calls, because even if, let's say you don't have a smartphone, which now I think 94% of Ben might know that number better than me, but it's north of 90%. Then at least you can get a call and a message is left on your phone. So there's kind of that documented outreach. I am not a proponent of setting any kind of expectation that we're going to flyer your front door. I know. But moving forward, I think that's, especially in an emergency situation, how quickly are we expected to print flyers and then how many neighbors are complaining because there's 100 flyers blowing around their neighborhood that didn't stick to a door on a windy day. You know, I just think kind of to that point, it's, you know, we can, I don't think it's asking a lot to opt into some of these things. It's just, it's the world we live in now. And if you really want to be informed, I mean, I just signed up for Siren in 30 seconds on my phone just now because I realized I haven't been on it since it was Swift. And it's done now. I did it, you know, and so but at least with the calls, like even if you have a rotary phone at home connected to an answering machine, still you'd get that call if you opted your phone number in.
I
And so,
do have a phone on my wall
Me too.
and I
Yeah.
will never get rid of it.
so I think, you know, that kind of is the best of both
Separate
worlds.
hanging listen board.
Yes,
Mine's
separate hanging, push button.
So-
It's not rotary.
So I want to be inclusive in our communications, but also I think there's only a certain level of expectation we can have that you're never going to reach everybody all the time. But I think between a text message alert and something that converts that into a robocall and leaves it on your answering machine, I think that's
We've got, so for those who are gonna listen to this recording later and haven't yet signed up for Siren, you can opt in for an email, a phone call on your mobile or a landline with a voice message and a text message. Those are all available currently.
Thank you.
so to me, that's pretty
When it
thorough
works.
when it works.
So we got one example of.
No, there were
complaints.
multiple before you came on.
There were,
Yeah.
okay. So you can go as we, and I'll stop talking, it's not actually the meeting, but you could go the other, which is blast everyone until people complain. That they don't want the alerts, because you don't want people to unsubscribe. Right?
That makes me chuckle a lot. Who would we interact with at emergency response? Like who's the,
Jeff, don't you? He's great.
I'd be happy to reach out. Just to see what's going on and why. I mean, as far as initial investigations, right, this was a two-part question. It feels like nothing is lost by doing that. And then, you know, investigate in parallel what other options there are.
Do you report of all the people who reached whenever this was sent out? I do think that there were a lot of people that were not signed up and maybe thought they were within the system.
Yeah.
That was because there were like 13 people that were reached out to with the initial blast. But there were, I think I got a big equal number of phone calls. But that mean, but I maybe 8 to 10. So, you know,
Weren't signed up.
and yeah, right, and they're not signed up, so I do think there's also an education piece to it. But then you said you also were notified too, and so I'm not sure, and I know there was one person who said she was signed up, she didn't show up on the list. But I think she was maybe getting the Swift. She was set up for Swift, so I don't know. But the next one that went out, I think was pretty successful.
To everybody.
So why don't, and I don't really care who does it. I mean, Jen's already been in touch, Jen and Jessica have already been in touch with Jeff, so. Why don't we find out, A, if we can figure out why the targeted piece didn't work this time. B, does he have a list or can he pull a list of everyone who has signed up for Swift? If he can, then we should be able to cross-reference that against everyone who signed up for Siren. And then, doesn't have to, I mean, this will take time, but if we were able to do that, then we could reach out to everyone who has signed up for Swift by whatever means of communication they signed up for and say, you're not signed up to receive notifications, even though you think you are. Here's how you get signed up. And then at the same time, do kind of a Swift marketing campaign. And I would be fairly pointed. I would say, you will not receive emergency notifications if you don't sign up for this. And that'll be on you, not us. And see how that goes for a few
Yeah,
And
because it's a
list
simple
the
process.
types of notifications, I would say, in that, like, you won't get, you know, water main breaks was this one, but there's others, and I think having that sort of itemized would be potentially compelling, because otherwise it just sounds like I'm gonna get spam.
And to be fair, the prior administration did use some really good strong language and pretty repetitive, like, you gotta do this, or you're gonna get left out. In the initial campaign, right?
we have something on the main part of the website, we can you can easily sign up, but.
Yeah, I'm trying to be like when this first happened,
Oh,
last year, it was like,
yeah,
you will miss out, sign up now.
It was pretty intense, but you know, it's easy to miss as well, right? Like, obviously, a lot of people.
Well,
miss
the one flyer I would sign up for is maybe an annual flyer that just reminds those in the village who aren't signed up. Just like, by the way. You know, you're, yeah, like you're still not signed up.
We could also do a couple of things, you know, not just.
Yeah, yeah.
Siren
just
and
like-
some other things.
And you'll stay connected.
Well, we've got State of the Village coming up at some point. We've often sent postcards for that too.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm not against trying the plane overhead. We just leave the signs in like. Text this number now.
That would be good.
I know.
But then we could say we've tried everything, you know, at that point.
Not everything. All right, anything else on siren?
So I'm sorry, for now, the protocol will be to address the whole list.
Yes.
Or to-
Unless or until you can figure out why the target list didn't work.
Wonder if we could put something on the postcard, the our postcard too, it's something.
Any other items of old business?
I just get an email, you got hold of me.
Love it. He's watching on YouTube from Florida.
Just catching up with all of it.
I do appreciate it, John. New business, we have some need of establishing a standard workday which doesn't exist for state retirement.
Yes, so we don't necessarily have to do this right now, but we could, I wanted the board to consider that. Each job has to have an identified standard workday for NYSERS, and that's how your goal of hitting how many years to retirement you have, and you have to establish a workday that's between 6 and 8 hours. And so that would be for everybody, police, EMS, officers, actually elected officials, and because if any of you wanted to opt into NYSERS, you can. And you have to have a board. It's like a board resolution identifying what the standard workday is. Which leads into a second conversation that we can get to when we talk about the personnel policy, because there's this notion of 12 hours is a standard workday in this department, but really it's on a 40-hour week. And so I want to be clear that this is really just a NYSERS consideration at this stage, but it's supposed to be something that's adopted by the board. And I haven't seen any documentation that it is anywhere. That's it.
I followed very little of that, I have to be honest with you. What is the implication here?
The implication is, so we pull reporting from payroll and report to New York State. So NYSERS, New York State, local state retirements, for instance, right? Based on what the board identifies as your standard workday, which has to be between 6 and 8 hours. That's how I tell them, you worked 20 days, you worked 14 days based on your hours. If you're an 8-hour standard workday, but you only put in 6, you didn't work a full workday. And your retirement is based on the reporting of your full workday. And so municipalities are required to have on record these standard workdays.
So I think there's something missing there. I'm gonna need more information on this
Okay.
because if we do that, then an EMS employee who doesn't work overtime will have only worked 3 work days in a week.
No, because it can't be more than 8 hours. This notion that a workday is 12 hours is not. It's a separate consideration and it isn't
That's my
really.
point. If they work 3 12-hour shifts,
Yeah,
then for state retirement purposes, they will have only worked 3 days.
no, because your day can't be longer than 8 hours.
Right, so you will say, you'll establish a standard workday for EMS is 8 hours.
Yeah,
And you'll say they have worked 3 8-hour shifts.
but if they worked 3 12-hour shifts, which is what they're working now, then it won't be 3 days. They'll have worked more than 3 days because they'll have worked 36 hours. So they will have worked 8 into 36 to get the amount of days, which you can't do right now in my head.
4.5.
Thank you. Which is what already happens because nobody's allowed. I don't know, we wouldn't not just make an 8-hour workday, but we just don't have it on record. It's one of those little pieces that you're supposed to have. So everyone right now, although I found a lot of errors in some other ways that things have been set up, which explains a lot of some missing time that was underreported.
And so this isn't saying a workday is 6 AM to, to 3 PM or something. It's saying
It's
just
hours.
hours.
But how
Sounds
many
like just a unit of measurement.
totally a unit of measurement. Why anyone would choose a standard workday to be 6 and everything above that more, I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me. It's
Why wouldn't you do that?
it's not to your benefit. People don't have to work as many hours to get a complete day for other reasons. It's not to do retirement benefit.
That's how they
It's
play
not-
it towards your retirement. So yeah, right.
It seems like an employee benefit then if we were to set the,
Yeah,
set
and then
the
they
number
would
of
go on
hours
to other,
lower.
you set up other weird conversations. Everyone in our,
No. So the 6 is for first response departments that work 3/10s. Because then you'd have 30 hours divided by 6 is 5 days. So they're getting their full state retirement allocations on 3/10s. Even though it's only 30 hours, but they do exist out there. Well, around here, they're 4/10s or 3/12s, but um, a couple that are 4/12s. They automatically get 8 hours of some kind of fringe time. Okay, I don't have an opinion on it really without seeing more detail, but
so you want me to like pull a split from NICERS that says standard
Yeah.
workday needs to be 6 to 8 hours and the board needs to have resolutions to make it such.
have they asked for this or have you just not been
Yeah.
able to find the resolution?
Like NICERS training, and.
See, I feel like this is on file somewhere from the 80s. So if they're not asking for it, what do we?
Because you
Okay,
want
then I'll
people to
just
get
make
the,
everyone 8, because every time I sign up a new person in a different department, like I don't have a document that I'm referring to that says, yes, the board definitely said it's 8. It's just, it's one of those things that seems, it's sort of silly, but if protocol is protocol and things on file should be on file, then we should have a document that I can refer to that says all village employees. are
Probably in a
8
box
hours.
upstairs.
and you want to
which is
make
why-
sure that time reporting is accurate.
It's probably in a box upstairs, which is why I want to digitize in 2018.
And it has to be
Because-
village-wide.
Where
So
is that?
our first-
Yeah.
Our first village employees were DPW. There were no employees before that, and they were 8-hour days. So in order to make them eligible for state retirement, if New York State required this, I would imagine it was done then, but that would have been in the 70s. Or late 60s.
So am I hearing, I'm gonna move forward with everyone being an 8-hour day for New York State retirement, which seems completely logical to me. We don't have any staff that are 30 hours and full-time, considered full-time, who would be 6. And we'll wait and hope that documentation comes up because we think it must exist. And if it doesn't, then I'll bring this back to the board.
Can we not do department by department? It has to be village-wide.
It can be department by department, but everybody needs to be assigned, every job code needs
Because
to
if we
be
go to
assigned.
7, then EMS actually gets a full week finally.
And
Are we effectively doing something today? Is there a,
it sounds like I'm just bringing it to the attention of the
No,
board.
you mean,
I'm just saying like today, like we're doing something today. Is that effectively an 8-hour day for all
Oh, we're
departments?
gonna meet every meeting.
But yeah, that-
Which has-
no, I understand. That was just the question I was asking.
But yeah,
which has always been the case. That's why EMS, which were not paid until 2000. So it was always 8 hours prior to that. So when EMS got when paid at 3/12s, they were short of a full week for state retirement purposes.
I mean, that seems like it's an interesting conversation to have, maybe. Maybe it's already been had and decided that that was.
But, it may come out of the negotiations that needs to change for them.
I'm happy to leave it to that.
Let's put an asterisk next to this one and bring it back I'd really love to see what's upstairs, once it's
Okay.
been scanned and digitized and searchable.
I'm gonna move forward with an 8, we're putting an asterisk in it, reporting could be changed should that day be reduced for any currently reported on employees.
Sure.
Okay.
Just a relief hinting at that maybe it hasn't been consistently reported in the past.
Oh, I think it was pretty blatant. Yeah, it was not consistently, because it was not consistently accurately coded in payroll program. In the payroll program, because this notion of a police officer works a 10-hour day, so their day is 10 hours. It's not really real. They work 40 hours a week. They happen to do it in 4 days. They're 40-hour-a-week people,
Right.
which says other ramifications we can discuss later. Personnel policy.
Getting the house in order. Getting the house in order.
Okay, so that topic will come back, I'm sure. The other item of new business, which we added to the agenda for tonight, is a draft resolution for this board to consider. I'm hoping everyone got to read it. Shall I read it? I guess I shall read it publicly. We can discuss and or move it and discuss. I'm not going to stand on formality with respect to that, given that this has been added last minute, as we're all aware. The town of Ulysses has been considering the purchase of some land for recreational use. That has generated much community discussion and is subject to a referendum, which will be held next week. So for consideration for this board is the following. Whereas the village of Trumansburg and the town of Ulysses collaborate on numerous projects, programs, and services, including infrastructure maintenance, emergency services, and recreation programming, among others. And whereas the village of Trumansburg comprehensive plan specifically calls for the enhancement of recreational opportunities, as well as the development of additional parks, trails, and open space. And whereas the village of Trumansburg has limited space or opportunity to adequately develop the above. And whereas efforts on the part of numerous public and private groups to find additional recreational space have been ongoing for the better part of 2 decades. And whereas the town of Ulysses has a unique opportunity to acquire a significant amount of open space for less than open market value, the acquisition of which can be accomplished entirely with Federal American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds instead of local property tax dollars. And whereas the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees believes that access to additional recreational space is in the best interests of all its residents, and in particular the youth of the village and the entire region, who routinely find themselves competing for space at school facilities which are in high demand. And whereas the town of Ulysses' purchase of the aforementioned land is subject to approval in a referendum to be held on December 6, 2023, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Trumansburg strongly supports the town of Ulysses' acquisition of the property in question. And be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Trumansburg applauds the Ulysses Town Board and its members for having the foresight, initiative, and willingness to invest in the future of the residents and youth of the community. And be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Trumansburg encourages all of its residents who are eligible to vote in the referendum on December 6th, 2023 to do so, and to vote in favor of the town's acquisition of this property. Comments, questions?
It's not my place to encourage someone to vote for something they may not want to. It's their business what they want to vote. It's not my business as a board member to encourage them to vote for something that I encourage them to vote. I don't encourage them to vote for the acquisition of the property because that's not my business.
Okay, that's fair. Any other thoughts? How about the rest of it?
I wrote down the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 whereases that I agreed with.
Okay, so five of the 7.
Yeah, The fact that we strongly support the acquisition of the property. There again, don't think it's because this is going to vote. It's up to the people. I really don't, I'm all for it being a voting thing. I feel very strongly that towns should not purchase real estate. I just don't. I didn't like it when they purchased the Grange in Jacksonville, supposedly to save a historical building. That's great. But I mean, there it sits and probably in the same condition that it was before. And who's to say after they sell it, that it's not even a salvageable building? And I totally understand the purpose, but I think there's strong arguments on both sides. And I just don't think as a board, and you can all disagree with me, that's fine. I'm not here to be, y'all might feel differently and that's fine, but I do not agree with saying that I strongly, I want people to get out there and vote yes. That's not my business. Everybody has their reasons why they are for something and why they're against something, and both sides may have very valid reasons. And
so let's set that last resolve aside. Let's say we remove that and we don't encourage anyone to vote at all. We're just saying that the village board supports the town's efforts in this matter. I want to go back to, you don't feel that municipalities should purchase property. We own the water tower property. For obvious reasons.
What I'm saying is real estate.
We own the real estate underneath the water tower property because
Right.
we needed a place for a water tower.
Right, exactly.
We own the real estate at the farmer's market. We own the real estate across the street. And I'm just making a point about
Right.
arguing.
Right. No, I understand.
We own the real estate across the street from the farmer's market. We own the real estate along that whole embankment along Old Main. We're about to own the real estate at the well pumps at Frontenac. So where there's a purpose or a need that requires the ownership of the real estate, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
So the argument, the counter argument would be that there is a real need for more recreational space.
Okay. Period.
Does that need equal the need for water? Well, maybe not.
No, I don't think so.
But if
So
but if
I guess that's where
It's a necessary, is it a necessary enough need to justify the purchase of property?
I don't
'Cause you
know.
can-
We'll
'cause you
find out
can't-
on December
Because you
6th,
can't,
won't
because you
we?
can't say municipalities should never buy real estate.
Right. Well, that's true. That
We
was
own the
a,
real estate that the fire department sits on.
right.
We own this real estate we're sitting on.
This
Right.
is village owned.
So, and that was controversial in the 70s when they bought this building and the whole board got unelected because they bought this place and here we sit in it.
And the new board at all the meetings.
Yeah.
That's very cute.
No, I understand. I'm just saying, as far as conducting the business of the village, I understand that real estate aspect, but.
Well, and I think we might disagree, but I would say you can't have recreation space without property. And I think it's pretty
No,
clear. So
Yeah.
maybe that is not what you're saying, but I think it
That's
is
not
also,
what I'm saying. Yeah,
but it's very clear from our comp plan, from the town's comp plan, and just from our lived experience that we need more space for recreation. The only
and I
way-
agreed with that. I agree with that,
Right, well, but-
whereas,
so to put those two together, the only way to get that space is to buy the land, though. Like, I think that's where I'm not sure where I'm not following.
Okay,
the
I
thought process
just-
there.
I just don't think it's my place to tell, so I think it's okay for me to say, go out and vote, however you feel, enter that and push whatever lever you want to.
So again,
Yeah.
forget the last resolve.
Right,
How do you feel about the village board saying all of the whereases and the first two results? We're not telling anyone what to do. We're not telling anyone to vote at all.
right. Oh, I would, yeah, I encourage the effort, yes, whereas I encourage the effort, for sure. Do I strongly agree? No. Do I encourage the effort? Yes. Do I want everybody to get out and vote yes? Not my business.
Okay, other thoughts?
So I am strongly reluctant to do any resolution that tells the town board what to do. And I'm assuming that this is an issue that you've given some thought to, and I'm curious to hear your level of thought, because I was frankly very surprised to see this come through, because this is not something that we traditionally do, and I feel like it sets a very, very dangerous precedent in terms of just establishing this as an expectation that might or might not happen for various political reasons.
But I thought about it a lot. We have, and you've been on the board the longest, but we've avoided weighing in on other municipalities' decision-making as much as we could. We have, and I'm probably forgetting one or two, but we have broken that kind of unspoken rule for certain issues that we felt were important enough locally. We still stay away from the, social security to age requirement debate, that kind of stuff, right? We've thankfully stayed away from weighing in on whether, Congress should or shouldn't spend money on such and such foreign country, right?
Yeah, there were.
But we did weigh in on Dryden's fracking lawsuit. We did file an amicus brief in favor of Dryden's right to home rule. I actually, in hindsight, really like how that was framed. We weren't weighing in on the fracking debate. We were weighing in on Dryden's ability to make their own decision, which I liked.
Right.
We weighed in on the incinerator plant up the street. And we're not telling Ulysses what to do. We're saying we support and encourage what they've already resolved by virtue of the fact that they allocated the money and now it's being forced to referendum. We're saying that we support and encourage and are grateful for their efforts. If this board feels that this particular issue rises to that level of local importance, that we would want to deviate from our standard MO of not weighing in on other municipalities' decisions. And the need or the need for additional recreation space. The question is, does that rise to that level? A few years ago, I probably wouldn't have said yes, because I didn't get stuck at the school with, one night it was 7 teams practicing 1 soccer game and an 8-school cross-country meet. And I realized these kids are on top of each other. Somebody's going to get hurt. And it's great that participation is at a level where that's an issue. But it would be nice if space allowed for it to not be a potential physical safety issue for some of these kids. So seeing it firsthand probably has me lean on one side of that conversation where I might not have always been there.
And so I'll say for my piece, I 100% agree with the resolution. I think and I'm happy to say that publicly as an official, as a citizen, as someone who's voting, all of those things. I think the Youth Commission adopted a similar resolution. That said, I really am very wary of the precedent, right? Because I know right now we have a really, really good working relationship with the town. I'm very, very wary of, future turnover boards, right? Where that relationship may not be as good, and they ask for something like this, or we say, hey, like we passed a resolution supporting what you did when it was really contentious. Could you do the same for us? And that creates that whole sort of scenario really is something that I'm very, very wary of, because we need to be able to work together. This feels dangerous to me, and just in that regard. But I do want to reiterate that the need is very much there. I think this is,
I agree with
an appropriate and good solution to the need. I very much agree with the resolution. I'm just very skeptical of us passing it as a board.
It's funny you mentioned that there was actually an earlier draft of this that had a whereas, which noted that the working relationship between the town of Ulysses and the village of Trumansburg has never been better. like literally in history, never been better. But I didn't think that was all necessarily relevant
Right.
to the
I think they can feel support without a resolution.
Yeah, I think so. That's a double-edged sword, right? I think the purpose, if we were to adopt it, the purpose of the resolution would be for this board to be on record with what we think of the purchase. With an election coming up next week. That, you know, and maybe there are people who will change their mind if we weigh in positively. I don't know. That's always a possibility.
That was gonna be my question, is where do we wanna
I don't know.
distribute
I
this?
just don't think
if it
that's
were passed,
our
but-
position to do that.
We can kind of get there secondarily, but to point out that that is, I think the value is to have this board on record and then let that be known to somebody and wherever it makes sense. I agree with you, Ben, but I also feel like there's a very distinct thing here where we are so directly impacted as a village by what the town does. And I don't want to mess up that relationship in any way, but I also think it's important for us to be able to say as a village what we appreciate and maybe where we disagree, where the town. It's very different than us supporting Dryden or supporting, Seneca Falls or whoever. Because there is such that close connection, I think you're right to be like wary of it and wanting to might find the right way to go through it. But I also think it's important to set the precedence of us being able to have these kind of conversations because there is such a direct connection between the two.
I will say that I had not considered doing this until over the weekend. Right. Some of the things that I had read and some incidents that occurred Friday, Saturday, Sunday made me think, maybe this is as important an issue as some people feel that it is, and that we should treat it as such.
I mean, I'll say that, if the town had asked for a financial contribution, I would be 100% on it, right? If there was something materially that we could do in that way, it's just this idea of like us as a board being put in a position, the next time something rolls around, that makes me just kind of squeamish. But
it's only the third time in probably the last couple of decades that we would be weighing in on.
It's true.
Someone else.
It's true, but in those other situations never created an expectation or a possible expectation, right? I mean, they were, Dryden's not going to call us up and be like, hey, we're going to increase our water budget. How do you feel about that? Right? Like, I mean, there's no scenario where there's reciprocity implied or where there's an expectation implied of any kind there. With the town, I feel like we are so close and we work together on so many things that they could ask for or expect a resolution that we support their budget because part of it is EMS, right? Or, I mean, just the number of potential kind of complications to me. And I don't know if there's a way to thread a needle there that we could make it clear, right? Because the case is compelling. Like I said, I think the resolution is actually absolutely right that this is a big part of our comp plan. I think this is very much a community need and one that we've established within our comp plan. And as Ben said, through all of our lived experience, I think pretty obviously.
I think where I struggle, like, again, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I also feel like this is kind of close to like a slippery slope sort of argument. Like this to me does rise to a new level. And I think the whereas help ground that in the fact that this is about our comp plan and is about our comp plan calling for something that honestly, like we can't do, right? We can't build this amount of recreational space in the village. I mean, there's a couple places where we could, but I'll put my planning hat on, like, they have water service, they should be houses. Like they shouldn't be empty rec space, like not empty, but like big open fields that could just as easily be somewhere else. And I think to me, that kind of the whereas start showing the uniqueness, the ARPA funds, the kind of timeline on it. It starts kind of showing that this really isn't just that goes on. that actually happened. So
Yes.
That is an interesting point. I do despise slippery slope arguments, and here I am making one.
And I don't think, like, I think, I don't know if anyone will go back and listen to this, but I don't feel like this sets us up for kind of setting a precedent going forward, because it does seem so unique to me.
Yeah, I was going to offer what Ben ended up saying, just like, I don't know how we satisfy this as part of our comp plan without Ulysses making a move like this. And it's an important, we feel it's an important aspect to the health and lives of the resident we represent, and I think we almost have an obligation to support the town. And I don't feel any obligation to stick by the town in future moments, just because, I mean, this is completely self-serving to the town, the village of Trumansburg, in my opinion. I don't think this puts us on the hook for anything, and I think this board has had conversations like this before, where we've said, we're the ones that got elected. You elected people to make judgment calls like this, and if you don't like our judgment calls, then that's when you don't vote for us next time around. And so I don't think this opens us up to anything. The town wants to request our support, they can go ahead and request it. And we have every right to say, we don't think that's a strong enough tie to our business. I think this is a very strong tie, excuse me, to our business. In terms of what we've laid out in the comp plan, what you've laid out, or with your own personal experience and my personal experience, connect with that too. You know, I think in contentious situations like this, where I would argue there is a lot of information out there and a lot of misinformation out there, there's controversy. I think people look to us as leaders to help inform them and to help set, you know, a tone around this that they can believe in, because we're a small town. You might hear one thing from one neighbor, another thing from another, but I think the one thing this board has done over the last 4 or 5 years is establish that we are thoughtful about the things we do, and the things we talk about, and that we can be the trusted source. And that's why I feel strongly that we pass this resolution, because if we all agree that we believe in the words, then we as leaders, I think, should be fine standing behind them. Do we have to tell people to vote yes? I'm fine leaving that out. I would have no problem urging people to say yes, because if you believe in our comprehensive plan, then you should want this for our community. But I also don't know, I mean, that's where I would be more concerned with precedent. Have we passed something in before that has urged the community to vote a particular way on anything? You know, we maybe we phrase it as if you believe in what the village comprehensive plan has to say, then this is something we hope you'll support as well, but we're not going to tell you should. But again, I'm flexible on that part, but
I think I would feel more comfortable if it said, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees strongly supports the town of Ulysses' intent to acquire additional recreational land and having the foresight and willingness to invest in the future of the residents. And then just end it with further resolve that the Board of Trustees in the village of Trumansburg encourage all of its residents who are eligible to vote in the referendum on December 6th to do so, period.
I'm gonna backtrack a lot right now. So I agree. I think you're right. That's why we were elected. I'm comfortable making that judgment. I'm a little wary still of doing it as an organization rather than doing it as an individual. But I think that is the right move. I think you're right. We would do a letter of support for like a grant
Yeah.
application, right? Like this is, the more I think about it, it's not actually that unique. And I think Ben's right that we are grounded in the whereas that are very clear and very specific and very limited. So I think yes, and again, thank you all for helping me talk that through.
I think Marcia's point is well taken, and now that I think about it, I don't want to tell residents how to vote. I'm not even sure I want to tell them to vote.
I would agree with taking this whole last whereas out. I agree with Marcia's point as well. I think if we take that out, I don't think we lose any of the power of the resolution. And then it's just more clearly a statement in and of itself. Right.
I would be way more comfortable saying I support their efforts in trying to acquisition land for
Well, no, on
recreation.
that point, so it's the same reason why I want to take the last resolved out. Makes me want to leave the first resolve the way it's worded it's what I told whoever it was, when we had our zoning conversation is the guiding influence when we make decisions should always be what's in the best interest of the village of Trumansburg and its residents. And what's before the people to decide next week is, does the town buy this piece of land? And is it in the best interest of the village of Trumansburg and its residents? If they do, I believe the answer is uncategorically yes. And so that's what this resolution would say, and we'd stand on it and then leave the whole voting piece out because we're making that statement that this is in the best interest of the village.
I agree. I think it's this property in particular.
Because that's what's in front of, that's what the decision is that we are attempting to support.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that framing of like, this is about what's good for the village. And it's nuanced. So like, and not everyone's even gonna read that back out of this, but saying that we're supporting that acquisition of property, not just supporting the town in doing something. It is, we're wanting something for ourselves, right?
Isn't the elephant in the room, though? I really think from the conversations that I've heard and from my hesitancy about some of it is the elephant in the room is, but is it going to work? Is it sustainable? We are a very, very small town. We're a very small village. How sustainable is, and I think that's everybody's question. I don't think anybody's against recreation. I think we want all my kids played travel baseball till they were blue in the face.
We would disagree on that. I believe that there are a significant number of members, and I don't significant number. There are some people in this community who do not believe that the effort to acquire, the effort to expand recreation is what.
Oh, well, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Right.
And so that's number one. Number two, I think the answer to that question, if obviously it's an unknown,
It is.
but I think if we were to say, if the town of Ulysses or the school or the village had acquired 30 acres of open space in 2003, do we think that 20 years later, this year, it would be used for recreational purposes? I think the answer would be unequivocally yes.
Mhm.
And so we're making
A commitment to the future.
yeah, and we're making an educated guess as to what can be used, and things can always go wrong, right? That first EMS budget was $205,000. It's 1.4 million.
Right. Right.
It is what it is. And
Right.
we are sustaining it because the community needs EMS services.
Right.
But if you had told that 2001 village board that in 20 years, there were gonna be over 1 million, they probably would have rethought what they did. I'm glad they didn't, because I'm glad we have the department. So that part of the future is always the unknown, but
Right.
will it work? Meaning, will it be recreation land that is used by future generations of youth soccer, youth football, youth everything, as well as other outdoor recreational purposes? I think the answer is yes.
I actually think the biggest question is it enough? Like, I think it's sort of the opposite is,
But, and I understand that, but it all costs money. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
100%.
Well, I think the question is, do we even get the chance to sort that out?
Exactly.
Right, and so by voting no, it means we don't even get the chance to figure it out.
Exactly.
And so by voting yes, it means we
Worst
get
case
the,
scenario, if it doesn't work at all, the land gets sold and you're never underwater with real estate, right?
and that's exactly right. So like, I think that to me is kind of the easy pitch of it is like,
And it
we
is
deserve to figure
the,
this out.
and it is the guarantee that it's not gonna all go for naught, you
Right.
know? The taxpayer's gonna get their money's worth one way or another. And it's the commitment behind the people that are supporting this that will hopefully make it work, and we'll have more recreation space, and we'll have, you know, you go to these other small towns, like I said, my boys played travel baseball for years. You know, a lot of these ball fields are in the middle of a cornfield just because these small towns don't have the room. They're out in the middle of nowhere. Trust me, I've been out there.
Well, and this would probably be a different conversation if the town was proposing some type of a special taxation district to levy the area property owners to buy the land and so on and so forth. But the fact that there's an opportunity to use federal dollars, and I get it, it's all.
It's all tax money.
But the fact that they're using federal dollars that wasn't in the picture a few years ago to make the acquisition,
Mhm.
I think that is a huge part of the calculus. It's not a local property taxpayer.
Right, but you do understand their concern that, yeah, okay, now we have this land, how do we sustain it? And there is a chance the town will come back to us and go, well, now we are gonna tax you to sustain
It's
this.
always a concern,
So,
just as it is with the fire department and EMS and police and other essential services. So if we believe that recreation, as the comp plan says, is that important and is that essential, then I think it becomes, you certainly try, I mean, I would love to get grant money to, you know, pay for all of our emergency services.
oh,
You
yeah,
look,
that'd be
you
wonderful.
look for ways outside of property tax
Right.
dollars to pay for those things that you feel are essential. The
Right,
question is, and this resolution is saying that it is essential enough to be done.
and like Ben said, in order to, we had a discussion about this, and in order to apply for grants and get that additional money, you need to have the space. You need to be able to go to someone and say, well, now we have the space, so this is why we need the money.
This vote is about having an opportunity to discuss a plan. That's really all we're voting on. It's the acquisition of the land, sure, we're voting on that, but in terms of how the land is specifically used and how much it will cost to maintain and how high do we go on that, that will be publicly debated after this.
Here's to,
And so, and I also think, you know, I get really personally frustrated with the tax burden argument, not because it's not real money, but because there are so many things in our budget that we should be fighting over, and no one wants to fight about it. No one really wants to open our books or come to our budget meetings and discuss what taxpayers pay for. And I think this is something that most of the public and the community can actually get excited for their tax dollars to potentially go to. That most families and people will have the opportunity to benefit from. So I just think it's a really often cherry picked argument, like, well, this is gonna cost us money. Of course, everything costs us money. Everyone sitting in this room right now costs the taxpayers money. Not much, some of us, but you know, but it all serves a purpose. And if we want to debate, you know, how much should that cost us? That's what you do, you know.
down the road,
Year to year, yeah.
right?
I mean, we're talking about probably mowing grass, you know, a lot of the athletic teams, I know. You know, right now I can talk to you as a baseball coach, like. We buy the chalk to line the fields, you know, we buy the diamond dry to soak up a wet field. We pay the umpires out of our pocket,
Mm-hmm.
We literally just use the grass and the school district is nice to mow it for us. But we tarp the fields when we're done with it. We take the tarps off. I bring extra tarp to my house if I know it's gonna rain, so. I don't think the cost necessarily is gonna be, and I have no really ability here to speculate on the cost of what it will cost to maintain land, but I do know that right now, being sandwiched into the school fields, a lot of that stuff is being paid for by individual sports programs.
Oh, yeah, that's the reason why there's a ball field and dugouts at the fairgrounds. Dick Robertson did all of that with his own money. Right, but Dick Robertson did all of that with his own money because we didn't have enough ball fields. It was out of his own pocket. He built those dugouts, he put that field in. And
So I think a lot of the programs in the local organizations that fund recreation that would use this space, I think they're very accustomed to paying them. Right? And then you're basically talking about the maintenance of whatever structures and the grass and stuff like that. So,
yeah, and the reason I brought that up is because there are people that are going to listen to this that didn't go to the town meetings, and I brought it up for it to be in the conversation so that it can be explained so that people can hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in a world where I spend a lot of my day trying to get people to think past tomorrow, right? I want them to think about 5 years, 10 years, 30 years from now. And it's the nature of government to be even more short-sighted than individuals tend to be, because you're either thinking about running for re-election, or you're not running for re-election, which means you've got a short period of time to do things, and everything's a year-to-year budget, and people are very tax sensitive. This is a rare opportunity to do something that will have ramifications decades from now. Even if it's, well, that didn't work and we had to sell it.
Right.
That'll have ramifications for the whole conversation around municipally supported recreation, whether it's for youth or adults. My expectation is that it will work, and that it won't be my kids. It'll be 2043, and whatever youth programs are running at the time will have access to more than the youth programs today have access to. And I think that can only be a positive.
So I'm reluctant to do this, but I feel like the other elephant in the room is the grassroots property, which deserves, I don't want to go down every argument, right? But this happened, I think, after the town piece. And I think it's worth pointing out that I would much rather tax dollars go to a local nonprofit on some level. It's very compelling. To me, I think it's sort of disingenuous to compare the two as if they're equal. That's something that is a deal sort of on the table, as opposed to a possibility of maybe a discussion. But I want to raise it because I know that's on a lot of people's minds. And I don't have anything really more to say other than I think it's disingenuous to compare them as if they're equal, but I'd be curious if there are thoughts other people want to share while we're sort of going down this rabbit hole.
My only thoughts are that there's no comparison between the two properties. There's no offer. A, there's no offer on the table that I'm aware of. B, the referendum is scheduled and it has to be run, by law. So the question before the voters, the question before the people is, does the town acquire a fairly substantial piece of land for below market rate that's eminently suitable for fields? And the former Duddleston property may be very suitable for something recreation based, but it wouldn't be as suitable probably for the fields aspect as this piece of property. So
You don't think so?
not for the scale.
Well, it's half as big.
You want 2 football fields and 3 baseball fields. You need space.
Why don't you need 2 football fields? Soccer?
I
was just gonna say.
Soccer fields.
I was gonna say,
Come
we
on.
got 8-man football. Like, where's the justification for that?
No, we could probably use as many just for football. I mean, that.
I mean, as far as practice fields and
practice
things like that
fields
go.
and
Well, game fields.
That one
honestly,
night
for
at
all
the
the
school,
clubs.
I mean, there was mean, you have varsity modified and two different Pee-wee football teams practicing, two soccer teams, one soccer team playing, and then the cross-country meet. I mean, it was nuts. And we're seeing that resurgence in the program where I think there were 36 kids on modified, 20
Well, the
plus.
year after we soaked all that money into the school, into that big sports complex, we didn't even have a football team the following year.
Right. So 5 years from now, when all these kids are in high school, space is going to be a real problem. Now, will these fields help in 5 years? I don't know. But certainly in 15 to 25, having it available. You know, they soaked all that money into the school facilities and they didn't have a football team the next year.
Well, now they do.
What year was that?
What year was that, Maureen?
19.
Right.
Okay. So now it's 4 years later and there's not enough room. So I'm going to tell you, they didn't spend enough money. They needed 3 more fields down back in the woods by Rabbit Run, minimum. And then there would still be crowded that day. So that's kind of the, you're always going to see that ebb and flow of participation, but if you don't have the facilities available, then.
Yes, and I would encourage the participation for sure.
Well, Gordon, I'm curious in the public discourse, is anyone looking at the comparison of the cost of medicine or obese and diabetic individuals versus preventative medicine of recreational spaces? Is that, seems like this is a good investment.
Sure, I mean, I don't think anyone's considering that with respect to the town's purchase of this piece of property. I mean, the science is clear that more activity for youth is always better. I don't think there's a situation where it's not better, but I don't.
I'm just looking at, we have emergency services that do a lot of lift assists for individuals who don't have capacity, like that's part of that.
Well, we know childhood obesity is in progress.
Well, if they'd flipped the food pyramid, that'd change a whole lot. And didn't put sugar in everything.
I know that's a wrap. Going all the way back to.
You're right.
Going on.
If you could see how our kids eat at school, you would.
Let's get back to rabbit.
Okay.
Ben, you mentioned if anyone wants to talk about the grassroots, my main issue with the grassroots property discussion is that it's kind of been offered up as an either or proposition. And I think we should move forward with this 30 acres. And I would love to locally have a conversation about that 13.5 acres as well, because the need is there. I think a lot of people, Lauren and I got kicked out of a gym today. You know, whether it's a community center, whether it's a museum on that land, like I think the needs are endless. And
I love the proximity to the village. That's a real plus for that.
Government money and organizations that raise it, and I think we should be talking with everybody that wants to legitimately offer the community land for recreation and community engagement. And I would hope that conversations with grassroots about that land, which to my knowledge have not officially begun, they plan to have a conversation with the town, is my understanding, that those would continue, whether this vote passes or not.
I mean, the community center idea is compelling. I mean, it's walkability to the village, it's proximity to the school. You can put baseball fields in cornfields, but you don't build community centers in cornfields. So.
And we need something for we have very active seniors. We have a lot of people with wonderful longevity in this town and nowhere for them to go. I mean, we need to think about that too. We'd love to be able to sustain the people and keep our older people, I'll shake my cane, active, you know, in their later years and have a place where they can socialize and come together. And I think that's a very needed thing as well.
I think that's my hope too, is that it's not an either or, that it's let's talk about the thing in front of us and then keep the conversation going elsewhere. The flip side is also my concern, is that if the conversation in front of us is a no, talking to some members of the town board, I'm not sure they have it in them to try and go round two with the same people, quite possibly doing the same thing for another land purchase. If people are And I don't know if I take them at their word, but if you take people at their word that they just don't want recreation space, which isn't everybody, but there's enough people, it doesn't take too many people to get a referendum. This whole thing happens again. I could see a lot of the board just saying, we tried it, we gave it a good shot, we're not interested, and kind of going around two. And so I think there's a real like just mental like
Right.
issue to kind of an emotional state to like
I
recognize
understand.
where people are at.
Mhm.
So I would love to see the kind of, let's say yes, and then like if grassroots is up for it, let's figure out the next step. Who can take a step into that space and have that conversation.
It can round two be completed within the timeline of the ARPA funds needing to be used.
Well, I mean, I think the ARPA funds would be used for the land purchase for what they're allocated for.
The vote was no.
Oh, right, yeah, right. If the vote was no, right, is there enough time to even turn that around, have the conversations, get
Oh,
the
I see.
assessments, go through
Mhm.
another round of referendum vote, the whole thing in the next 12 months, the clock ticking? I don't know either. That's a good question. It seems tight for sure.
Well, to Keith's point, I find it, the argument that has only surfaced in the last week and a half to 2 weeks, that the potential use of any land behind the SureSave area is an either or choice to this purchase is clearly a red herring argument by opponents of the purchase by saying it has to be one or the other. I mean, the reality is nothing is ever really just
One or
one
the
or the
other.
other. And there isn't a mechanism to, end the referendum and switch gears. The referendum has to happen, which brings us back to the resolution, which is this board potentially weighing in and saying, we support this. And for whatever weight that carries, if it carries any, which frankly it may not, but if it carries any weight with village residents who may or may not be even, like you said, Marsh, they may not even really be paying attention to this yet. And then they'll realize when it goes out in the newsletter this week that, oh, there's a vote on Wednesday.
And you know what? People get very passionate about things that directly affect them. Obviously, I don't have kids in sports anymore, but I can't tell you the miles I put on my van driving my kids to them. And I have grandchildren and all my children are here. So I certainly want them to have the opportunities. I certainly would rather have them be outside than inside. So, and I think most people would be too. So, and like I said, I think the passion comes from, is this directly going to affect me? And I think we need to think outside that box.
Yeah.
Like you said, what is best for the community at large?
So the reality is this isn't going to really impact any of us
Right.
anytime immediately.
Anytime immediately anyway. Right.
This is a future play. Absolutely.
I still would like to take that one part out though, about
That last whereas.
that last.
The last result.
So having started this, thinking I was gonna vote no, and now fully turned around. I would like to move that we adopt this resolution as read, excluding the last result.
Okay, we have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? Conversation.
I'd just like to, I think this was a very productive conversation.
I agree.
Yeah.
Why do you think about the food pyramid? We're gonna say that.
Mental health and obesity.
Flip the food pyramid, please.
Okay, resolution as presented minus the last resolved. Any other comments? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you everyone for the conversation. We'll get that edited and then posted on the website.
Can I just delete that? Do you want a copy of this? Can I just delete it and then certify it and post it?
Sure.
Sweet.
And then we can include it in the newsletter Friday. Great. Any other items of new business? Maureen? Anything you'd like to add?
Well, yes, I greatly respect all of you and the work that you're doing. and the conversation that you're willing to have at the board level here tonight and I hope the community does tune into it. Your comments at the end of this is the only thing that I keep looking at when the debate goes, do people want this for their children? All of these people involved in it, this is not self-serving at all, because the reality as it has been presented by the board is this will take years for these to be active fields, because they're going to look for the funding. They want community input, and you send things to committee and it takes a long time. So it is not self-serving at all. And I applaud each one of you, and for Marcia for being the devil's advocate to make sure that this conversation is had. I attend their board meetings on a regular basis, and they've been lasting about average 15 minutes. And all of the work they do is to put forward our children. And what you did here tonight was much more than any conversation that they have ever had as a public board serving the community. So I greatly appreciate each one of you offering your opinion and coming to consensus, opposing opinions voiced respectfully and coming to consensus and agreeing to do what's best for the children of this community. And I think back to Marcia saying, when there's one day that stood out in my mind in transporting my daughters and friends, and I came home and it put on 112 miles in one day and got nowhere. I was at the same place, and then I went to the Sure Save, and it felt so great to have that automatic door open. You did something for me that day. But so many miles that I put on, and I do that now with my grandchildren by driving 5 hours to them in New Jersey. And I love going to their municipal fields and parks that don't exist in their village. And I have to drive through farmland to get to them. But it's a great place to go to. And people will be putting on fewer miles to be able to go as close as they will at this new fields if that happens. But what I take away from here tonight is you truly are public servants and you respect the public that you serve by having these conversations during your meetings. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have need of an executive session? No? Fantastic. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.